It's podcast time. Yeah, kid. Welcome everybody back to another episode of the Handsome Homebuyer podcast. My name is Charles, aka the Handsome Homebuyer, aka Captain Permit, aka, and our guest is probably the only person that's going to understand what I'm about to say right now, El Judío Maravilloso. Normally I would yell to the crowd, but I never get any feedback, so I've pretty much given up on that. All right, people, if you need plans, you need permits, you know the deal. You need anything permit related, you need the captain, 516-513-8838. The town's getting crazy. Business is getting crazy. Evictions, people building. The market is red hot on Long Island. Everybody is moving from the boroughs. Everybody's coming out to Long Island. From tip to tip, Nassau to Montauk. If you are building, renovating, legalizing, selling, if you are in the real estate world at all in any way, shape, or form, you need the captain. Know before you go. 516-513-8838. And obviously remember Lotus Quotes, LOTUSQUOTES.com. If you're a listing agent and you get a listing, as soon as you put that listing up, you go to lotusquotes.com. We give you a free CO search from Captain Permit. You get a free insurance quote from our amazing people at Allstate, and you get a tax grievance analysis from Heller & Clausen Tax Grievance Group. This is stuff that is absolutely vital. There is nothing, and I mean nothing worse than working your ass off, working with buyers, working with sellers. You're 2 weeks away from the closing, and all of a sudden the attorney calls you up and says, we're not closing. And you're like, what do you mean we're not closing? There's no permit for the deck. Hit up the captain, get on lotusquotes.com. This way you will know way before and you can plan. Either negotiate it into the deal, have it fixed, give it a credit, but it's not going to be a surprise. Obviously, as well, I am the one, the only, the man, the myth, the legend in my own mind, the handsome home buyer. If you have a house that smells like cat pee, is dated from the 1960s, has 6 inches of mold on the wall, human waste floating past the basement step, I don't give a shit what it is. If it's real estate related, if it's on Long Island, hell, even in the boroughs now, I'm quick, I'm easy, I'm a good time. I want to buy it. 516-777 sold. All right, so we're going to change it up a little today. We have an amazing, amazing guest. I've actually known her for 10, almost 12 years at this point. I've seen her blossom from a young lady into an amazing powerhouse businesswoman that she is today. Let's do some highlights here. 28 years old, born in Cuba, which is an amazing place. If anybody can go, I went there about 5 years ago with her brother. Life-changing experience. And we're going to talk to her about the immigrant experience and how that impacted her upbringing and why she is the way she is. And once you meet her, you will see what I'm talking about, and you will want to know more about what she does and what she's doing. She's on the board of the IIBA. She's a market sales manager for Kimball, controlling the territory of South Florida and the Caribbean. She is a workplace strategist. So essentially, she is an interior designer, but on a very, very different level, which you're going to find out. Also, she has this unbelievable desire to help people, which is amazing. Because of that, she has started a recent side project where she's going to be a business and performance coach in that space and others in a one-on-one and group environment. And she just started the podcast, the Infinite Attraction Podcast. The first episode aired last week. I listened to it, almost brought tears to my eyes for a lot of different reasons, but there's a ton of value that people can get out of that first episode. And I know there'll be a ton more value to come in future episodes. Hopefully I'll get a shot at being on that podcast. So without further ado, Elizabeth Irizarry.
Hey, Charles.
Hey, what's going on?
It's good to be here.
What
Thanks for having me. That was the best intro.
Right? A lot of energy. Did you expect nothing less? You've known me for long enough to know.
It was so good. It was great. It had me laughing. Thank you.
Nice. So obviously, knowing me, that we can't get into this podcast without first paying homage to your hair. how truly amazing and thick, and vibrant.
It's the Cuban in me, how
much personality it has. So the first thing I want to touch on is, because I think this is super relevant and I'm interested about it, even though I know you, but there's a lot of things I don't know about you, is you were born in Cuba. Mm-hmm. And I want people to understand, what you went through, what your family went through, and how you came to this country, and then how your experience in Cuba and what you learned and went through there impacted ultimately who you are today.
Yeah. I think that is probably the most important factor of my life, was that I did have that experience, and, coming to the States and I talk a little bit about in my podcast some stuff I never really shared before, but I thought, oh, this makes me who I am. And you know, we were growing up in Cuba, life at the time in the 90s wasn't really fabulous. And we had very, very, very low resources. And so my dad, he left and he risked his life at sea, but my brother was always sick. I was always sick. And my mom said, there's no way I'm going to take my child on this makeshift raft and like maybe not make it.
So let's dial that back for half a second, just so people truly can internalize what you said. Like your father, tell the story, like your father straight up built a raft and like paddled from Cuba.
Yes, so it was actually about 19 people altogether. And like 3 of those weren't really necessarily family, 3 or 4, but the rest were. So my aunt was there with my cousin, who was the youngest in the group. She was probably only about 3 or 2 years old. She was basically a baby, a child. And then there were other family members, my uncle, and everybody served a part. And they decided, well, you know, we got to leave. And at the time, things were really desperate. It was like 93, 94, when everybody just had to get out, and they were whatever it took. So conversation using different skill sets amongst each other. You know, my dad was like doing like engineering. He was good at putting things together. So was my uncle. And so they all got together, put money down, like sold everything they had. And you know, my dad left us behind. That says a lot, to say, I'm going to leave my family, because if there's a chance here, you know, that I can get through, then I can bring you. So my mom was an absolute, she was like, there's no way. Like I said, my brother was epileptic. He was sick, and I was like sick too. I was a very sickly child at the time. I wasn't eating well. I was just often always sick for any reason. So my mom decided, well, this is not worth it. It's not worth the risk. And there's already so many people going on this, you know, makeshift raft. And she was afraid, like any other human would be. Like, you're going out at sea, you don't have any clear direction of where you're going, you're just going. You're like, this way? And so my mom was just like, it's not happening. But my dad's like, I have to do this. And so he did. My grandma left, my uncle left. There was no one. We were alone. It was my mom and I, my brother, and maybe my mom's side of the family, and that was it.
So kind of tell people a little bit about, you know, the political climate and the lack of opportunity. Like your brother, who's one of my best friends, I remember he would tell me stories about, and when we went there, we would speak to people, and they were literally rationing food. Like you would get X amount of eggs per month. Like the average Cuban would have a salary of like $20 a month. You get like a bag of rice. Like it is something that is very difficult for people in this country to truly appreciate and understand.
Yeah, I think that it's hard to talk about it now because it's even worse right this second. Obviously, it's quite a difficult time in Cuba right now. But I think that the easy picture that I can paint for you is the space that I was living in at the time with my brother and my mom is something I can never erase. And every time I happen to like go through the albums that are often black and white, and I wasn't born in the 50s, but you would think that I was, like, all of my pictures are either mostly black and white, or like the hints of color looks like it was like the first time it was ever produced, like a color picture. And, you know, the walls like dripping, like it was like water would come in, like there was no resources, there wasn't food, medicine, like, you couldn't find things that you would say, oh, it's so normal to eat here, to find this, to get beans, to get rice, to get that. You couldn't get those things. So not having a man, and culturally back then, obviously the man plays such a big role in the family. So having my father leave and us having to fend on our own, it's very difficult. It's very difficult. So I know that I remember my mom's challenges and fear of like not hearing from him, not knowing if he was going to come back, if we were going to have to like fend for ourselves moving forward. And it's challenging. So it's not just food, it's like your environment, it's everything around you that becomes a challenge. We were living in really poor conditions.
So ultimately, what ended up happening, your father made it through. He was given political asylum. And how did you guys find your way to the country?
So yeah, we didn't know he was alive for a little while, but then we did. So that was great.
Wow. Like how long? A little while?
I think it was over a couple months, like 3 months or so. And then,
wow.
And then the whole process, you know, like you can't communicate that easily either. And it was very expensive to call here. So they would find ways like to call, from Miami to call here. And then my dad eventually moved from Miami to San Francisco, which is where we have a great uncle that he was able to help him and get him started. And he started working there. And through my great uncle's like church, they did like a mission, and he was able to legally claim us. And so my brother, my mom, and I flew here. We got this like card that comes in the mail, and it basically tells you like, you got it. But my mom's and ours arrived first, and my brother's didn't. And I was a kid, so like you're like ruthless.
Believe in you.
I basically said,
You're not
going. And then like, don't tell Lewis, but he cried like a baby, and I laughed. My mom like me, like you. But no, his eventually arrived. We were able to leave Cuba, and it was like, imagine this. Like, you've never seen technology, really. Like, you've never seen anything, and you're getting on a plane, and you land in Miami, and you're just like, what? It's like you got in a time machine. And as a kid, everything looks like impressive. So it was like looking at everything was like, what? Like I couldn't even focus. Like my cousin gave me a toy. We fought over it because it was like, oh my God, a doll. Like everything was like drama. And I remember being like, where am I now? It's like I fast forwarded so many years of my life from what I saw in Cuba, the cars, everything, the cars. Oh my God, seeing normal cars, like, in the 90s. I was actually living the 90s in that moment. So it was kind of cool.
So for those of you out there who've never been to Cuba, it is an absolutely amazing place on a lot of different levels. I went there in 2015 with a group of friends, and it is literally like people have heard the stereotype, but it's true. It is literally like you have stepped back in time. There is no cell service. You are completely off the grid. The cars are from like the 1950s. It is just a very interesting, it's probably the last place of its kind, right? Like, I don't know where else in the world you can go to have that kind of experience.
It's funny now because the last time I did go, I was just laughing because I'm like, how do they have, like, people now have cell phones, right? And they actually have like iPhones, some of them who are fortunate to have an iPhone.
In Cuba?
Yeah. So they have like a cell phone. Now the connection is weird. It doesn't work like it works here. You don't get free Wi-Fi everywhere. They're all like gathered in these parks where there's like connection. It's really funny. But you look at everything around them and like they only have that phone. If they have a smartphone, good for them. And everything else around you, it's like when you look around, you're like, where am I? Like the cars are old, the buildings are, still old. There hasn't been a lot of renovations done to anything. So it's like, it looks like everyone is stuck in time except for their clothing. Their clothing which gets sent from the States. Everything they have is essentially from here.
Yeah. So when you came here, I know that you bounced around to different places and you ultimately ended up in Miami. Mm-hmm. How old were you when you came here?
So I was about 4.5 when I, set foot in the States, 4.5. Mm-hmm.
So kind of interested to know, even though you're very young, those are really your formative years were spent in Cuba. So big impacts there. You still remember a lot of things about Cuba. And then coming over as an immigrant from a different country, how do you, or did you not assimilate to the culture? Was it hard? Where you were first? I know you're in Miami now. It's obviously like being it's like being in Latin America or being in Cuba. But what was your transition from, Cuba to the States like?
I think I'm grateful that I didn't actually live in Miami when I got here. We lived in San Francisco. Like I had a connecting flight from Miami to San Francisco. Like it was just the connection period that I actually spent in Miami. So I wasn't here very long. And then we went on that connection flight and we were in San Francisco. We lived there for about like 3 years. And that's where I absorbed everything. The reason everyone always asks me, like, why don't you have an accent? My brother has a very heavy accent.
Hardcore.
But the reason I don't have one is, well, first of all, I was 4. And at 4, you're like still like everything around you, you just absorb it. And I like not having ESOL programs like in Miami. It's a very common thing if you've never heard it. It's like a program that they know you speak Spanish and they put you in a class with a bunch of Spanish speaking students and they're all teaching you. And I feel like in a way that can be helpful, but also like can harm your development because you're already surrounded by Spanish speaking students. And as a kid, then you just go to the easy route. And when I went to San Francisco, there was no ESOL. I got thrown in a class where my teacher's name was Miss Bear, and I couldn't even say Miss Bear. Imagine trying in Spanish, not saying Miss Bear. Like, I had never heard such an American name in my life except for Elizabeth. which was like the reason they gave me an American name, was that I could say that.
Mm-hmm.
But so I was like, how do I say Miss Bear? And then all the kids, there was like one Mexican student in the class and like barely spoke really Spanish. So I was forced, and I would go home and then my parents would buy me like a Disney movie. My first movie was Bambi. And it was in English. Bambi was in English, but it was like beautiful. Like in Cuba, the cartoons, my brother could tell you, like we could say they were terrible. So like seeing this beautiful movie, colorful, like it felt like right now I would say like HD. And obviously if you've seen Bambi, it's not necessarily HD, but at the time it was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I would watch the movie over and over, Charles, until they would give me a second movie. And then it was The Little Mermaid. And then over and over, repeating every single word in the movie, the music, the lyrics, until I memorized them and I learned English. That's how I taught myself English.
That's how you legit taught yourself English.
Legit, I was watching Disney movies constantly, just like trying to learn. And like, it just happened. I can't even begin to explain it. And then being in a class where all these students only speak English. And as you can tell, I'm not really an introvert. I would just want to understand. I wanted to talk. I wanted to like be a part of it. So like I forced myself and I learned. My parents, though, I kept it from them. Like they didn't know. Because when you're home.
Know what, that you were watching the movies, or?
They didn't know that I was learning English from watching the movies.
Got it.
So like they actually found out that I learned English when we moved to Miami, because I got in trouble in school. And so then when parent-teacher conference comes around and like we're sitting in this room because they had to call a very important special meeting just for me, one of the things was that I was being bossy in class. Does it surprise you? So apparently I was being bossy. I was being the leader. So my mom turns around and she looks at me and she goes to the teacher, like in Spanish. She says, like, how is that possible? She doesn't even speak English. The teacher turns to me and she asks me a question in English and I respond. My mom's look and what happens underneath the table when they pinch you. It's like, wait till you get home. And that day, my parents found out I was speaking English. Isn't that crazy? Like they had no idea the whole time.
I get it though, because I did watch telenovelas to try to better my Spanish speaking skills, but they obviously didn't work as well as Bambi. So if they have Bambi and Little Mermaid in Espanol, maybe that could help me out.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So then I want to fast forward a little bit, because I actually don't know the answer to this question. Where did you go to college?
So I went to the Art Institute in Miami. So Miami International University.
So I guess, I'm going to dial it back half a tick. You are obviously a very, very, very creative person. Again, I know you, that's why, but living in a very creative, artsy, vibrant, colorful place. Where does that creativity start? Where do you it seems like you had found your first major passion at a pretty young age. Like I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do until like 5 years ago. I always remember you being a designer and always being a creative, but at the same time, having like a certain business savvy that a lot of creatives don't.
Yeah. I think it came from like I said, I think it was that background childhood. So the moment that I moved here to Miami, I was like the side hustle kind of person as a kid, like I washed people's cars for $20. Like who does that? But I washed people's cars for $20 as a kid.
That's a lot of money. That's a
yeah, I was doing it. I was like, I was like side hustling the family hard. I was like, that car looks dirty. Like that's a big, like my dad had like a Suburban. I was like, oh, that's looking like a little bit more money, maybe 25. And I was like doing that. Then my aunt's neighbor, like the kids, like I would throw parties for their kids and like do the paint faces and like do people's hair, like anything that I could come up with to like make cash. And then I would tell my mom, like, one day I was going to be a millionaire. Like, you could ask her. It was hilarious. I'm like, I'm going to be a millionaire. Don't worry. So, like, I always found things. And then, like, in my journals as a kid, I found this. My friend found one recently that we shared, like, a slam book or something like that. And in the journal, I wrote in terrible, like, before I could even spell, that I wanted to be an interior designer and I wanted to do something to help people. And my friend found this recently. And I think we wrote it, like, I can't remember. It was many years ago. And we were probably in middle school, younger. And so then when I fast forward to high school, like sophomore year, when we have this like fair, like job fair, I like look at everything. Everything seems boring. Like nothing seems exciting. This one woman has this video up like about art and like technology and it had fashion, it had interior design and creating spaces for people. And I was like, that's it. And right there, I told that woman, I'm going to go to this school. This was like sophomore year. I wasn't even a senior. I went in there just to like explore. And then come senior year, I told my parents, like, this is it. This is what I want to do. Like, it's done. Like, I'm going here. It is what it is. And I didn't skip any time. Like the second that it was like, okay, school's over, I didn't take a summer break. I went straight in and I started, and I moved out on my own. I like went to school full time. I worked full time.
So why did you, and I know you touched on this a little bit in the podcast, but the like me, so I'm 40, and if I could, I would move back in with my parents now. Like,
I think I would too.
But it seems like I didn't want to grow up. Like the nickname my mother has for me is Peter Pan. Like I never wanted to grow up. I still don't want to grow up. And it seems like at a very young age, you became extremely independent. Moved out, gone. Like you basically moved out at 18 and never came back.
Yeah. Charles, it's the circumstances of the way, my environment. It was the circumstance of my environment, and my family was kind of like, we had our own issues internally, and my parents fought often, and being I always felt independent. And so I had to learn to do my own hair when I was in school, because my mom, her first job was the night shift job. So I didn't have my mom around to do things. And my dad didn't know how to do it. And then my dad was everyone was out working. Who was going to make food at home? Who was going to clean the house? And culturally, the way that we're raised is you do everything. You cook, you clean. It doesn't matter how old you are, you do it. You participate in the house. And so I would make food for my brother all the time because my mom wasn't around, and maybe he only knew how to cook one meal. And so it's so imagine you're the youngest one, and you're there cooking, cleaning, doing things. It forces you to grow up more than maybe you want to.
Yeah, but see, the interesting thing about stuff like that is I was just on the way driving here, I was thinking about some really horrific childhood experiences I had, and then thinking about how they were so awful at the time, but then thinking how they shaped me in such an amazing way going forward. So I'm kind of curious to know what you feel the impact of that was on your life.
Well, I'm 100% grateful because, I think back a lot of, leaving at 18. And I think for me, it was independence. It wasn't so much the being desperate to get out of there. In a way, yes, I wanted to leave that setting because I felt a lot of negativity around that setting. And at the time you think everything is so much more than it is. You amplify that moment. Like you said, later on in life, you go through it and you're able to see what that served you today, how that served you today. So I just really needed to get out. And I was tired of being in there, seeing things that my parents didn't want to change, but I could see that they were possible. I wanted my mom to change, things, and she wouldn't do it. I wanted my dad to do things differently, and he wouldn't do it. And so, I had to go. And I had to start my life. My brother was older at the time, and he was dating, and maybe he wasn't home as much. And, life was different for him. And I'm well, I'm not going to sit here and absorb this. So I wanted to build the life that maybe they couldn't have. So the life that they didn't have, it kind of fueled me. And I was I'm getting out of here, and I'm going to build that for myself. And it just gave me this strength. So I think back, and I'm grateful that I did move out at 18. I grew up really fast. I mean, for 28, I have been extremely successful in my career.
Another thing that was in my mind that I was okay, I want to start to talk about this is, so you got into interior design, which is very cool, but you didn't just get into traditional interior design. You studied interior design more in commercial settings. I remember your brother telling me and then talking to you about it. At this particular time, you were working on hospitals or something like that. And then you ended up going into more of the office space. And obviously there was a huge transition from traditional office to more open to co-working. And then now COVID has essentially changed the office environment forever. So it'd be really interesting to see what you've been seeing going on the last 6 months.
Yeah. So I actually got into the industry when I was doing my thesis in college. I always thought I was going to do humanitarian kind of work. So I went to go into healthcare design. And then I made the transition to just start in the industry immediately because obviously to pay for the bills, like I had to work. So I started working. And I did more like workplace design. So I was specifying furniture, and I was doing more specifications like floor plans and things like that. And that's the gist of what I was doing. So it's commercial design. So commercial design, it's not like residential where you're designing like a person's home. You're really designing like it's offices, healthcare, higher education. It's different verticals. And it's really like the overall design and the experience of a customer coming into a space. And it's not just for one person, but for multiple people. And that's what I enjoyed about design. And that's what I wanted to tap into further. So that's what led me to the workplace strategy side. So, and on that end, I was doing more research, researching trends, generations, cultures, experiences, the culture within an organization. What did they want to create? And I found that just to be absolutely fascinating. And I kept digging in there and speaking with people, speaking with like owners of companies, and what do you want to achieve here? What do you want the benefit to be for your, employee? How do you attract and retain? And having those conversations was just like exciting.
So talk about like, your experience and your education in regards to how you lay out a space and how it ultimately impacts like the productivity of employees, and how employers should be really fixated on that, because the way they design and set up their facilities really affects their bottom line in regards to productivity.
So I'm just gonna let you know, it's telling me I might get signed off again, but you might have to like fill in for a second. I'm sorry for all these technical difficulties, but that's life. So maybe I'll get on my phone in the meantime. But the way we design spaces, I think it's so important. The reason I love this industry so much and I fell in love with it was because you can have such an impact on people. We spend most of our lives in our workplace. Like we spend more hours working than we do doing things for ourselves. So that environment has a huge impact on your day-to-day, on the way that we react to life afterwards, because we might have had a really bad day because maybe management was poor, maybe the chair you've been sitting on for hours is bad. And then everyone thinks that you're productive really for the full time that you're working, and they expect your productivity to be at 100. But out of those 8 hours of work, you're only actually productive 3. So it's really interesting. There's a lot gets lost during those hours. Like your attention will sleep away. You could be in an email, but you're no longer in that email. That's why they say in the morning is your most productive space. Like in the afternoon, you tend to lose yourself a little bit. Like in Miami, we turned it into cafecito hour at 3 p.m. Like no one wants to work anymore. Everyone's taking these shots of coffee. And like that's when, as a salesperson, you start to visit people because, that's when their downtime is. And at lunch, people, want to take a break. Often what happens is that it's not accepted in most offices to take breaks, well-being is such a big topic now. And it's something that for the past couple, about say year or two, it's been going out, pushing onto the industry, really focusing on having more amenities spaces to help people, with the wellness factor of it all. So I think that that's never really been accepted, and it's starting to be accepted where mental health is so important. And you're in an office sitting there. Do you hear me now?
I'm going to disconnect the second you. All right, much better and clearer.
This is iPhone, so that's a
better. The clearest you've looked the entire time.
I should have done iPhone the whole time. Gosh.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that what I found so interesting in it was that shift that I started to feel. And then within my own offices, how do I have a short attention span. I'm similar like you. It's like squirrel, and then I'm like moving around. I'm like moving around from place to place. I don't like to work in the same setting. And I'm so lucky that I work in an industry where I can explore different work styles. I can explore, that because we're preaching it, right? So we want to work in that form. So what we do as interior designers and workplace strategists is to really focus on that experience that you can have. How can we improve your mental health? How is like your finding in your space? Like, how can you break off and have more breaks? And as tapping into what I'm doing now, the reason I wanted to do this portion of it is like, how can I implement this training that I'm doing now and bring that into this kind of environment in the workplace? Because the future of work is always a topic of conversation. Is how are we going to work later? How are we going to constantly adapt? So for the longest time, I went from working in really closed environments where like we had cubicles and everyone had their own space and everything was separated, less communication, to like a huge shift. Everything went from separation to like, now let's get together. Everything is open. They eliminated cubicles and it became open benching is what we call it. And it's just basically an open desk and everybody's crammed together. First of all, that was also because, we needed to use the footprint. So what was available in the space, you needed to maximize because money. So we need how can we maximize the space and put more people? And so it wasn't always with the best intentions, I will admit. We always knew that we had to adapt the space per the client's needs, not necessarily the need of the employee sometimes. But it's doing those research and finding that information, how to adapt spaces and still make it comfortable for employees. Then we shifted to like the collaborative spaces. Everything had to be open and collaborative. Then we went to like, how do we give people something, for their health? Because now it matters. So then we started going to height adjustable desks. So then like the next big thing was like, everybody needs to have a height adjustable desk. And why? Well, this is why. Ergonomically, it's good for your back. It's good for health, like physically, mentally, everything. There was multiple reasons behind it. And then now we're in the place where we're like, okay, well, now we need to separate everything again.
Now nobody come into the office ever again.
Now nobody can, but now there's an issue there because there's a huge population that wants to get back because they're working. Some people can work from home and they're really diligent and they can be more efficient because they find more distractions in the workplace. Others find that they work better through collaboration. So, it's very true. There's a lot of research that shows that having people around boosts your productivity because maybe it's an internal competitive feature that we have, that we see someone working on something or we want to ask each other for the help and you just want to be better. You want to strive for more. You see other people around you and you want to be like them sometimes. So that it's an interesting time. It's definitely going to create a huge, our industry has been one of the most impacted because we supply the workplace, right?
Sure.
And the workplace right now is like kind of on hold.
Yeah, but from great change comes great opportunity, and with that, I want to segue into your new passion project.
Yeah.
The Infinite Attraction podcast, coaching, personal and business, group and one-on-one. So where did that come from? What is it? What's the plan? And what's basically like kind of the why of that?
Well, that came from opportunity. So it's a perfect segue. Opportunity is like the word in mine. I think that during this difficult time that we've been experiencing the past couple months, this pandemic, it's an awakening time for a lot of people. It's having an impact on us where we're forced into reframing our minds, the way we see things. It's something that culturally we didn't expect was ever going to happen. It's affecting the way we work, the way we live. It slowed us down so much that it's forcing you to refocus and figure out what's important in life. And because it impacted my industry so much, and I'm so much more interested in selling I'm more interested in the experience a person has, that this experience is now changing. And I was moving very fast in my career. And like, I was just like going. As a salesperson, you don't really have time. You're just about a number and you're growing and you're trying to figure it out. And I was moving at a very fast pace. I was trying to figure out what was next. Like, what was next in my career? What do I want to do? And I never had any time to slow down and figure out like how I've been impacted by all of it, right? Of this fast pace. Because all I ever wanted was like to be successful, to not only for myself, but really to prove to my parents that, hey, all your sacrifices, they were worth it. So being forced to slow down had me really think about all these struggles that I've been through in the past years. And like I was mentioning, when I did go off the first time, was
I am young, but I've been through so much. Like, life forced me to live through a lot of things that I think have been lessons, but sometimes you live through the lessons, but you don't realize that they're lessons to begin with. So being forced to slow down and look back and reevaluate and see them for what they are is what caused, me to be here and do the coaching. So I dove into the coaching as a form of personal development and professional development. I wanted to do a training because I wanted to kind of dig deeper into that aspect of me that wants to give back, and that also, not give back just for other people, but to myself, and find what have I learned from everything so far. And that's why I started the coaching, which led to the podcast. And the podcast, I think, has always been a dream, right? I've always felt like, not to sound cliche, but I've been destined for more. And like, it's like so cliche, I know, but I feel it. Like I told my mom I wanted to be a millionaire. Like as a kid, I've always had this like drive for like big things, big dreams. I'm a dreamer, 100%. And I've always wanted to do more. And I've always felt like, the struggle that I've had within my own career and my, profession is, I'm always seeking more. And if there's something I don't know, I want to know it. And I want to learn aspects of the business and not just speak them. Sometimes people go into like manager positions and they haven't really worked every aspect. So then as a manager, you're trying to teach someone something that you haven't lived through yourself, but you've seen on a training on a computer. I strongly believe that you have to live through it to have a better understanding of how to communicate with people and just in general. So, I just, all these feelings of like what I'm destined for more came out through this form of expression through the podcast. I sat one day, literally, I just sat there and I felt like I have been through so much. And I wish that I had some of the resources that I have now when I was really struggling and when I was going through a lot of the pain and the hurt that I was going through. I had a phase where, like, as happy as I sound all the time, I was like severely depressed. Like, I didn't really talk to my family about it because it's kind of taboo. You don't talk about it. Your family doesn't communicate about these things. Like, you don't tell them that you're like having a panic attack and like you have extreme amount of anxiety. You're just trying to charge through and tell them that, I'm successful and it matters. The other stuff doesn't. So like I went through a really tough period. Like I got divorced very young, and that has to take an effect on you. And at some point, you have to speak about it. And I think it was just like I told my family, hey, I'm getting a divorce, and I was afraid of their reaction. And then that was it. Like, oh, you'll be okay, it's fine. But that was it. There was no real help. And so I tried to just move on the way I know how to move on, by just moving on. Like there's no better way. It's just figure it out as you go. Since I've had to figure everything else out, I'm like, well, I'll just keep going. So then going through all those things is what, now looking back and being grateful for those moments, being grateful that I did go through a divorce young and that I did go through all those things. I did have all those experiences as a child and all those struggles. It made me realize, there's more there. There's more there. And this is how I could help people. That the fact that I have this awareness at this time, at this age, and the ability to speak to people, I need to use it. And so that's why I did the podcast. And in the podcast, I dove deep. I shared a lot of things that I can talk about my story in a bigger picture, like, an overall, but not really tell you the truth, right? Not really tell you what I was going through. And being able to do that now, being able to share and tell people that people always thought I'm very happy, extrovert, perfect, right? Like everyone thinks I'm always like, happy-go-lucky. And being able to tell people, well, that's not the case. There's another side of me you might have not known, the side that pushes, that's going through it, but it's going through it internally. And I think that we need to be able to communicate externally as well.
So I kind of want also just to dig down, because I've listened to the podcast, and I'm sure no one here has listened to it yet, but they will. How important it is for you you kind of stopped, you were in a bad place, and you did this kind of like autopsy on your life and your previous relationships or current relationship, whatever was going on at the time. And you, I guess, put together a plan of how to ultimately, heal yourself or put yourself on the path to healing. And I'm curious to know, what that was like and how you put that together.
I think that what happened was that lowest point. I think you have to feel something really different from one point to the next, right? So suddenly I felt like I was on the upwards. Like I was living the life in a way in my mind. I was very happy. I just wanted to grow my career. I was just like on the path of moving forward. I only cared about what was next, right? Like the future. I was never necessarily content with the present, but I was living the present. So that forced me to evaluate. And when I was so low, when I was so depressed, when I was so bad, I sat there and I'm like, how did I go from never having these issues or never being depressed before to suddenly like I'm extremely depressed? How was I ignoring whatever I felt before?
Do you feel that you occupied your time and mind with just work in order to kind of maybe subconsciously repress what was going on?
100%. I made myself as busy as possible. And I'm that I think if you've ever asked me like, hey, how are you? I'm like, I'm really busy. I think my answer has always been like, I'm very busy. And now I try to answer differently because it's not a good thing to just say you're just busy, because it's really, I see what it does to people, and because it did it to me. Like, it's great to be motivated to work and to have a career, and that's wonderful, but you repress a lot. And I repressed so much, and a lot too much that I'm still working through. There's a lot that it's going to be a long process to work through. So by repressing all of that, it just builds up, right? All that emotion built up, all that feeling, everything that I had within me built up till like I was exploding. And then I started to feel, I questioned some very personal things that I haven't really even shared on the podcast, but the depression led into some thoughts that I'd never had before, and that it was against my moral. Like, it was against anything I ever believed in. The thought of like feeling like, why am I even here? Like, why am I alive? To have that thought, it's quite sensitive. And it's like, what? And I could hear it in my head. And it's just funny because I was like having conversations with myself a lot. It's like, are you crazy? Like, like, why are you even thinking that? But I was having them, and I didn't understand where that was coming from, because I was holding so much for so long. Then when it was coming out, because everything fell, right? Like I had everything that I thought I wanted. I got married. My career was moving up and upward. Like, it was doing great. I had, money, like, which was awesome at my age. Like, I was fine. I had a car. My family was healthy. Like, things were great. That's what I thought I needed. I thought what I had was what I wanted. And so everything was great. How could it not be, right? So,
which goes back to my favorite quote from the podcast, which was, let me not fuck this up. It kind of seemed to be like the whole premise of everything, which was it? It's not what I wanted. It's what I thought I needed.
Yeah. So it was basically that. It was realizing that I really had everything I thought I needed, but not necessarily what I wanted. And I didn't know I didn't want that until I no longer had it. And until I had to go through the grief period of losing everything that you wanted. Because all my life I thought that was what you had to have. My parents didn't have it. I wanted the white picket fence dream, right? The American dream, living in this country. That's what you're here for. So if I'm here for that, I have to have it. I want success. I want this. I wanted all these things that like I saw in movies. Because I had to live through movies because I didn't have it in my real life. So I wanted what I didn't have in my real life. So whatever I saw in movies, not just Disney movies, but like, we're talking about like the 90s and the 80s, those movies that I would watch that were like this perfect, oh my God, you meet someone and you fall in love the next day and you're getting married. Like, that is not real. But I saw that. I saw these people have apartments that are like unrealistic, and I wanted that. So I kept figuring out, how do I get that? To the point where I didn't know what I wanted. I just wanted that because I saw that. And it would drive me crazy because like when I lost it all, I was like, what have I failed at everything? It's that moment of feeling like I failed at everything. Like, this whole time, my whole goal was to get here, and now I failed. The one thing I told myself, like the biggest thing I said to myself was, I don't want to be divorced. I don't want to do that. And that's the first thing that happened. I laugh about it now because it's just like crazy, because I felt so adamant about it But who cares if you get divorced? Like, looking back, it's like, you know what? I'm glad I got divorced. I'm glad I went through it. I mean, it's reality. I learned so much from it. I think now if I would ever, if I were to get married again, whatever that case may be, when I get there, I have much more respect for the relationship. I understand, what marriage is about. I think marriage is still very beautiful. I think that there's a lot that I think you would need to give in a relationship. It's quite more complicated than people do. They just get into it and they don't realize what they're getting into. But I don't have the need to, like at that time, it was like the need to get married and to say yes to marriage because that's the next thing to do. There is no next thing to do. I'm not going to allow, it's the not allowing society to tell you what's next for you.
Yeah, no, societal pressures are crazy. And it's very interesting to see, like, this is the kind of thing in one way that, like, scares the shit out of me about wanting to have kids and how kids can be shaped by these external factors that have nothing to do with you. Like a Disney is something as innocent as a Disney movie and what impact that can have. I want to kind of close out with this, because obviously you have a ton of experience. You're very, very, very young. You're 28, even though I still think you're 21, as we discussed before. I mean, the future is very bright and it's very long. What is the future? What does your future hold? What are your plans?
Well, the future goal, I like goals, but I like to, right now, I'm really focused on the present, Charles. Like, we don't know if there is a future right now. Like, times are quite challenging. So I do have a future goal in mind, is to be happy, to find fulfillment within whatever it is that I'm doing, whatever that may be. And I'm no longer going to decide my future based on like a fixed goal, right? Like, in the future, I'm going to be a millionaire. I don't know if I want to be a millionaire in the future now. I thought I wanted to be a millionaire in the past, but now I'm here and I'm like, I don't know that that's what I want. I don't know what I want. I know that in the future, I want to just find fulfillment and happiness in whatever it is that I do. So right now, it means this podcast. Right now, I'm putting I'm pouring my heart and soul into this podcast, because if it can have any impact on people's lives, then I would have been successful, and I find fulfillment within that. So that's what I'm focused on right now, is like, I'm no longer trying to keep searching for more and more. Like, that's always going to be evident in me, is to want to elevate myself. But I rather elevate myself on a daily basis. Like, how am I different today than I was yesterday? Because when you push forward so fast into the future, you miss all the little things that you could have changed along the way for yourself, for your betterment. So I guess what my goal, what the future looks like, I know it looks amazing. That's what I know for sure. Like, that's awesome. The perfect answer I could give you. It's like, I know the future is going to be great. No matter what it brings, it's going to be amazing.
The journey is beautiful. You are amazing. I love you. Thank you so much. I'm very proud of you and everything you've done and what you continue to do. For people out there who are interested in checking out the podcast, seeing, involved in coaching and listening to you and seeing what you have to offer, how do people find you, social media, etc.?
Yeah, on Instagram, it's Infinite Attraction Coach. I'm also on Facebook, Infinite Attraction as well. And I'm on all mediums. You can find me on LinkedIn. My name's Elizabeth Irizarry. On LinkedIn, it's much more professional, but I do put the podcast on there. So just follow along. The podcast is Infinite Attraction. It's on Spotify. It's going to be on iTunes shortly. It's on Google. It's on multiple platforms. So wherever you listen, go ahead.
Yeah, check it out. It's an awesome listen. Everyone's going to get something out of it. Again, you're the best. I really appreciate your time. My apologies. I have to run because I have to jump on somebody's podcast at 10. So I will be in Miami soon as they let us in there. And I hope to see you guys soon. Thank you so much.
Bye.